All right, so if you guys are in the market for a 360 camera, then you might have come across this, the Insta360. This is the X4. It's an 8K 360 camera, and there hasn't been another 360 camera this size until now. We do have the new Kandao QooCam 3 Ultra. And last year I did a video on this one, which is the QooCam 3, and in that video I did talk about a bunch of things that I would like to have seen on their next revision, and they definitely have upgraded a bunch of things from this camera now on this one. Now when it comes down to use cases, everyone has, I would say, their own way of using 360 cameras. For me, I use it when I'm with my family, when I'm out there doing some action sports, and I normally use it as a secondary camera, complementary to something like my action cam, or if I'm using my Sony or anything like that, where I know I'm just want a short or small piece of 360 footage to add into my story. I know there's a lot of other people out there that use 360 cameras for events and for dash cams and things like that. So I'm not going to be able to speak to those because that's not how I use it. Now, something to note when we talk about 8K cameras, that is taking into consideration the entire 360 shot. So if you look at this camera and know that there's a 4K camera on this side and a 4K camera on this side, if you were to put those together, now we have that 8K resolution. However, when you are viewing a specific piece of content, you're not necessarily viewing 8K in front of you. You're actually viewing a smaller subset of that 8K video. So you're normally going to be viewing it in something like 2.7 or 4K. You're not actually watching 8K coming directly out of the camera. Now, quick overview as far as specs goes, and I do want to jump into some of the video side-by-side footage that I've been able to shoot with this camera. Now, when it comes down to video resolution, the original QooCam 3 would shoot 5.7K 360. Now it's bumped up to 8K, up to 30 frames a second. We also have 24, 25, and up to 30 frames a second. Same specs we have here as far as video resolution goes on the Insta360 X4. Next, we'll talk about aperture. We have an f1.9 on the Insta360 X4. We actually have a wider aperture here, an f1.6 on both of these cameras. If photos is your primary focus, 96 megapixels on the new Ultra. Here on the X4, we have 72 megapixels, and here on the QooCam 3, 62 megapixel photos. All of them shoot JPEG and RAW, so if you guys want to do some post-processing on them, we do have that RAW option on all the cameras. One standout feature we have here on the Ultra that we don't have on this camera is we do have HLG 10-bit. Here on the X4, we have the standard profile, the vivid. This camera now has the single lens option, which means you're able to just use one lens at a time. All right, so one new feature we have here on the QooCam Ultra is we do have single lens mode, which is something that we have here on the Insta360 X4. Now, the reason why this is such a big deal as far as the change goes, because we didn't have it on the original QooCam 3, which means you weren't able to use one side of the camera in 4K. Now we are. On the QooCam Ultra, we can use individual cameras. So if you want to shoot with this side of the camera, you can, and if you want to switch over to the other side, you're able to do that, and you're able to do it in 4K resolution. Now, one thing I did notice on the color range when I was shooting in 10-bit is that when you are hitting record, when you hit record on it, you do not have a preview anymore. So you're not able to see what you're actually shooting on the screen. It blacks it out, or it has a little text on top of it. Now, the first one I'm talking about is build quality. Now, if you are familiar with the original QooCam 3, definitely is the same, or feels very, very similar to that build. It has a very similar design. As you can see here, it is much bigger than the original QooCam. The Ultra is bigger, and sadly, it's a lot heavier than this one right here. The Ultra comes in at about 340 grams, which is a significant jump over something like the X4. Having that extra weight on the back of a vehicle, or if you have it on a longer stick, you just know that that weight is gonna kind of bend that pole a little bit more than these lighter ones here. For me and what I shoot, I will tend to lean towards the lighter, more compact 360 camera because I'm putting it out there on a longer pole, because I'm putting it out there in places where I have a little bit more, I would say, risk of the camera falling or breaking because I'm out there using it for skiing or sports or things like that. When it comes down to screen size, we have 1.9 inch horizontal screen here on the QooCam 3, 2.19 inch screen also in that horizontal format, and here on the X4 we have a 2.2 inch screen, but it is in a vertical format. Now, one feature that they did come out with on the Ultra, which I am super happy about, and I know that moving forward, pretty much all action cameras, and I really hope even just standard mirrorless cameras and pretty much all cameras moving for drones and everything. We have internal storage, and not like some cheapy 16 gigs internal. We have 100 gigs internal storage on the Ultra. Having a internal storage even as a backup to your SD card, because you can still put an SD card in here, 100 gigs, that is really good. Next, we'll talk about video resolution, and I talked about it earlier. These are 8K cameras, and you can really see the difference between this camera here, which is 8K, and the older QooCam 3, the 5.7. Massive, massive difference between the quality of this camera even compared to this one right here, which was released last year. There's a few shots that I got when I'm putting these side by side, and I was looking at the Kandao, I was looking at the Ultra footage, and I'm like, ooh, that one just looks really, really good, even compared to the X4. And then there was a couple shots where I had it inside of my car, and for some reason, the Kandao, the Ultra, would start blowing out a lot of highlights, and then the X4 would be just super clean. And I don't know what it was. I left everything at auto. Everything I'm shooting here is all going to be at auto. I want to leave everything as standard as possible. So when you get it out of the box and you put it up in the air or put it on your stick and you hit record, everything is in auto. I didn't color correct anything. But overall, when you compare these to something like the older, I would say 4K or 5.7K 360 cameras, there is a massive jump as far as quality goes with these two cameras. Now, when it comes down to battery life, both the X4 as well as the QooCam Ultra actually did about the same. They have the same, roughly the same size battery. The Ultra comes in at 2280 milliamp battery, and the X4 has a 2290 milliamp battery. When I was out there shooting side by side, I felt like both of them did really, really well. I didn't have one drastically reduced more than the other one. However, I haven't tested it yet in extreme conditions. I can say that the Insta360 batteries, you can see in all my previous videos, these batteries do really well in both heat and cold. So once I get into situations where I can test this out, I'll be able to do that, and I'll come back, of course, with a little updated review. One really cool feature that we have built into this camera that you actually need a accessory on the X4 is that we actually have built-in GPS. So when you're out there shooting, it's actually mapping you, and you can actually just toggle it on if you want to be able to download that GPS information. And with the X4, if you wanted to have GPS, you actually have to purchase a separate accessory for that. When it comes down to image stabilization, both of these cameras do, actually all three of these cameras do really, really well. There wasn't one situation I would say that stood out, again, too much more than the other one. We have all the same shooting modes as we did here on the QooCam 3. So if you did have this camera, we have all the same modes that we have on this one. We have them now on the Ultra. Now, if you're coming from the older QooCam 3 to the new Ultra, I do like the fact that they moved some of the buttons around. Here on the old one, we do have the power and the record button at the very top, which sometimes gets a little bit confusing, especially if you have it mounted. There's a couple times I was mounting it and I was like, which one is which? You normally just want to go by feel. Now on the Ultra, we have a big button right in the middle of the camera, so you know that you're going to be hitting that to view, and then of course hitting that to record. So big button now right in the very middle of the screen. On the side, we have the power as well as the mode switch, kind of like a quick switch here, as well as your USB-C. And on the other side is where your battery and your micro SD card will store inside this compartment. Now, the one thing I was surprised about is that when I was out there shooting some car shots in the heat, and I put this down and I didn't realize I was still recording, but I left it out in the sun. So this thing was pretty hot. Now, it kept recording, which was the good thing. It kept recording, and it didn't stop, even though it was super hot outside. But the thing was, I can hear a fan. So there's fans here at the very bottom, which we didn't have on this one. You can kind of see this little heat sink here at the very bottom. But they were actually pretty loud. Now, it's just something that surprised me because I really haven't heard any fans on any other ones. I don't normally use the 360 footage to try to pull the audio from it. I don't really use it much for vlogging, even though you do have the single cam mode, which is really cool. But I don't really use it much for the audio. So I didn't mind that it was the fans were on, because I'd rather the fans be on than this thing stop recording and just shut off because it overheats. Now, when it comes down to user experience, like I talked about earlier, this is one thing that I take into consideration a lot when using cameras and how I'm able to process the footage and just the whole ecosystem. And Insta360 definitely has that still over QooCam or over Kandao when it comes down to the software, when it comes down to the mobile app, the desktop app, they definitely have that process down. But QooCam did make some huge adjustments on their desktop studio. But I think just the rich features that Insta360 has, both on their app and their studio, definitely outperforms the QooCam Studio when it comes down to the ease of use, the intuitiveness, and also some of the options in there, both on the app and on the desktop. For me, how I use my cameras, I'm trying to keep things as light as possible. Also, I normally throw this on a longer stick. I put it on the back of my car. I put it on my bike, where this thing kind of bangs around a lot. Having a lighter, smaller footprint definitely helps in those scenarios. Now, if you're the type to use your 360 camera for, say, something like real estate, or if you're mounting it somewhere and you're not gonna move the camera as much, this thing does really, really well, because you also have higher megapixel cameras. So if you're doing interior shots of buildings, of homes, and you need those megapixels, you need that higher resolution, this one right here works best in those situations. So when it comes down to video quality, you definitely want to bump it up, especially if you're coming from an older 360 camera and you know that the one thing you're missing is quality, then you're gonna wanna jump up to one of these cameras. If you guys are interested in any one of these cameras, links of course will be down below in the video description. And if you guys got value from this video, a big like would be much appreciated. This is also Stacio with FlytPath.com. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.